Hello to all viewers. Hello to everyone. I am Shiloh, the last scribe for the house of Jacob. I am a messenger and a true servant of the Almighty. On November 29, 2019, the Almighty will visit the earth to judge every living thing. On that day, every living thing will be given life or death. The Almighty has caused me to see who I am and to know that I am a real descendant of the house of Jacob. This video is part 10 of a series of videos titled The Book of Genesis, Unsealed and Untold. And these series of videos covers everything in the book of Genesis, from chapter 1 to chapter 50, with all the confusion removed, with all the allegories removed. In these series of videos you will hear the truth according to the Almighty, according to what the Almighty commanded the house of Jacob to keep recorded. Part 9 ended with Abram, his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions leaving the land of Egypt and coming back into southern Canaan. So I will continue where I left off. Let's begin video number 10. The Canaanite and the Perizzite dwell in the open country of the land. There Abram invited those guests who were with him and preached to them. He preached the report and the Almighty's proclamation aloud. He proclaimed the honor, the authority, the reputation, and the glory of the Almighty to be for a memorial. Lot was with Abram, and he had flocks, herds, and tents. Because their substance was great, the land was not able to support them, so they could establish themselves together. Also, concerning law and order, there was a multitude of controversy, quarrels, and contentions between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. Abram spoke unto Lot, saying, I pray that you let there be no controversy, disputing, or contentions between me and you, nor between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, because we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? I hope you will separate yourself from me. If you will take the north side, then I will go to the south side. If you go to the right side, then I will go to the left side. Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, well watered everywhere, like the holy land of the Almighty. All the plain of Jordan was well watered, like the fields and wilderness of Egypt, as you come unto Zoar. Then Lot chose all the plain of Jordan for himself. Abram and Lot separated themselves from one another, and Lot journeyed east. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the city of the plain of Jordan. Lot pitched his tent toward the city of Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were men of mankind. They were bloodthirsty men. They were evil and vicious. Their thoughts were wrong about the Almighty, and they thought evil against him. Their actions caused great amounts of adversity, misery, calamity, trouble, distress, injury, and unhappiness. These men were criminals in the sight of the Almighty, because they had sinned to a great degree. The Almighty accounted them as sinful, and now they were carrying the blame and condemnation for greatly offending the Almighty. After Lot separated from Abram, the Almighty spoke to Abram, saying, Now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are. Look northward, southward, eastward, and westward. All the fields and wilderness and open land you are gazing upon, you have foreseen by vision. You have my command upon you, and I have given this land to you to occupy. I have observed and considered the children of your semen, the descendants of your offspring until the end of your posterity, and I will extend my compassion. The Almighty continued speaking and promised Abram, saying, I have appointed this land to children of your semen, to descendants of your offspring, and to the last of your posterity, unto certain descendants of moral quality. Of your posterity I have appointed this land to a practitioner of my righteousness forever. To be for a sign, I have ordained and appointed a set of descendants from your offspring, to become a nation. They will commit to, care for, and rehearse my command and my covenant in the land. I will put my charge upon them to constitute, and to be for a sign. At the end of your posterity, I have ordained descendants from your posterity to become a nation of returning exiles. I will preserve them, and I will transform them who are of moral quality. I will fix them for my purpose. They will commit to honoring and executing my charge. They will rehearse and care for my charge. They will constitute my charge. I will establish my commandments with them. Then I will cause these descendants of your posterity to become like the dust of the earth. So if a man could number the dust of the earth, this is how you will number your descendants. Now arise and walk through the land in the length of it and in the width of it, because I have given it to you. Then Abram removed his tent from that place and departed. He came into Hebron and dwelt in the plain of Mamre. He set up and built an altar there to honor the Almighty. Now Amraphel was the king of Shinar in Babylonia. Arioch was the king of Elasar in Babylonia. Kedorlaomer was the king of Elam, and he was in a place east of Babylon. Tidal was a Canaanite king of different Gentile nations. In the days of their living it came to pass. These kings dressed themselves for engaging in warfare. They prepared their warriors for fighting a battle, and they made wars. All those kings made war against the king Barak. King Barak is the king of Sodom, and he was a son of injustice. All those kings made war against the king Birshak. Birshak is the king of Gomorrah, and he satisfied himself by wickedness. All those kings made war against the king Shinab. Shinab was the Canaanite king of Admah. All those kings made war against the king of Shemaver. Shemaver was the king of Zevaim. All those kings made war against the king Balak. Balak was the king of Zoar. So King Amraphel, King Arioch, King Kedorlaomer, and King Tidal joined together as allies. All these kings made war against King Barak, King Birshak, King Shinab, King Shemaver, and King Balak, who also were joined together as allies. All these kings on both sides were tied to the charms of magic. These two separate alliances of kings came to battle each other in the lowland of the open country, wherein the salt pits of the sea. King Barak, King Birshak, King Shinab, King Shemaver, and King Balak had served King Kedorlaomer for 12 years, and they rebelled in the 13th year. In the 14th year, King Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Rephaim. The Rephaim were an old tribe of giants, and they were killed in Ashtaroth, Karnaim. King Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Zuzim. The Zuzim were in the country of Noah's son Ham, and they were slaughtered. King Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Amim. The Amim were in Shaveh, Kir-Ahim, and they were slaughtered. King Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Kori. The Kori were slaughtered in the mountains and hills of Seir. The attack continued unto the Hori, the mighty ones, their leaders and nobles who were in the city-state of El Paran, and they were slaughtered. Now, based on their relationship to the people, based on their spirituality, King Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him turned back and came to Akin. Akin of Kadesh. King Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him attacked all the land of the Amaleki, and the Amaleki were slaughtered. King Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him attacked the Emori. The Emori were a Canaanite people who lived in Hazol Tamar, and they were slaughtered. In the valley of Sadim, in the lowland of the open country wherein are the salt pits of the sea, King Barak of Sodom, King Birshak of Gomorrah, King Shinav of Admah, King Shem-Aver of Zebaim, and King Balak of Zoar engaged in warfare against King Kedorlaomer of Elam, King Tial, a Canaanite king of different Gentile nations, King Amraphel of Shinar, and against King Arioch of Elasar. In this battle it was 4 kings against 5, and the valley of Sadim was full of slime pits. The king of Sodom and Gomorrah tried to flee and escape, but they were attacked and died violent deaths. They were inferior, therefore they were overthrown and cast down. Those of them that remained fled on horseback to the mountains, and they escaped. King Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him took possession of all the riches, all the food supplies, and all the goods in Sodom and Gomorrah. Then they went their way. They took possession of Lot, Abram's brother who lived in Sodom. They took possession of Lot's goods, his food, and riches. Then they departed away. There came one of those who fled and escaped. He came unto Abram. Now Abram was a man of the species of Ish. He was a descendant of Eber, or Aver. Abram was living in the plain of Mamre, the Emori. Mamre was brother of Ashkol, and Emori, dwelling in the valley of Ashkol. Ashkol was the brother of Aner. Aner was the leader of the Emori. These rulers and lords were sworn to foreign gods, but they all pledged their friendship and made alliance with Abram. They pledged friendship with the Almighty. They made an agreement to keep the covenant of the Almighty from being violated. Now, one of those persons who escaped spoke to Abram. Abram listened and understood what was declared unto him, that his brother's son Lot was captured and carried away. Abram armed his trained servants. Altogether they were a total of 318. Abram and his servants pursued after Lot into the northern city of Dan. By night Abram assigned divisions among himself. Then he and his servants attacked the enemy and killed them. Abram pursued them unto Hovah. Hovah is a city north of Damascus. Abram brought back all the goods and riches. Abram brought his brother's son Lot back along with Lot's good and riches. Abram brought back the women and the people who were captured and carried away. After Abram returned from the slaughter of King Kedorlaomer, and from the slaughter of the kings that were with him, the new king of Sodom went out to meet Abram in the valley of Shaveh. Melchizedek, a priest king of Salem, brought Abram bread and wine. Melchizedek was the priest king of the Most High God of the Elohim. Melchizedek praised and adored Abram. Melchizedek declared, saying, Praise and adoration be to Abram from the Most High God of the Elohim, who is possessor of heaven and earth. Praise and adoration be to the Most High God of the Elohim, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. Then Melchizedek gave Abram tithes of all he had. Then the king of Sodom spoke unto Abram, saying, Give me the people, take the goods and riches for yourself. Abram answered, saying, I have offered my strength, my power, and my fellowship. I have contributed my hands to the service of the Almighty. The Almighty is much higher above angel princesses. The Almighty is much higher than the Most High God of the Elohim. I serve the Almighty. The Almighty is the all-supreme being. The Almighty is the all-supreme ruler. The Almighty is the creator of all things. The Almighty is the first possessor and originator of the earth, its heavens, and all its inhabitants. Therefore, I will not take a thread from Melchizedek, and I will not take a thread from a shoe latchet from you. I will not take anything that is yours, because you might say, I have made Abram rich. Apart from what the young men have eaten, give a portion to the men that went with me, including Aner, Ashcol, and Mamre. Let them take possession of their portion. After these things, the Almighty communicated with Abram. The Almighty visited Abram and talked to him in a vision, saying, Do not be inspired, nor put in fear by morals of the godly. Do not be inspired, nor made afraid by the honor and respect persons give to those of godly morals. Abram, do not fear their terrible acts. I, the Almighty, the all-supreme being, the all-supreme ruler, am your ruler and protector. I am your weapon and shield of defense. I am the greatest worth. I am the greatest degree of greatness. I pay the highest price for hire. I pay the greatest wages for service. I give the greatest benefits and rewards. Abram responded to the Almighty, asking, What will you give me, seeing that I live according to your manners? Seeing I travel abroad to and from places, speaking of your customs? What will you give me, knowing I am destitute of children? I am childless, and the heir of my house, this Eleazar of Damascus, is a servant steward, a son by possession. Abram continued speaking to the Almighty, saying, Look and see, physically, you have granted me no children for descendants. Physically, you have not given me a child of my semen. Yet, look and see, a certain servant born in my house is my heir. He is my son by possession. Then the Almighty responded to him, saying, Your servant will disinherit. He will be brought to ruin. He will take possession of poverty and be impoverished. He will not be your heir, but he that will come from your own semen will inherit your possessions. He that will come forth from your own semen will be your heir. In the vision, the Almighty took Abram outdoors, out of the streets, out of the fields, outward and abroad. Then he spoke to him, saying, Now look toward the heaven and consider. As a learned man, as a learned scribe, take account of the shining stars that rule over the stargazers. As a learned scribe, record the number of shining stars. Count the stars that are personified by the Elohim to be an all-knowing God King, his family, and his progeny. As a learned scribe, count their number in totality and declare them accurately. If you can number them, the Almighty told Abram, this is what the number of descendants from your posterity will be. Abram considered that the Almighty nourished him. The Almighty cared for him. The Almighty had established him. The words that came from the Almighty assured him. Abram trusted in the Almighty and remained faithful without fail. He believed in the Almighty. Abram believed the Almighty is the all-supreme being. Abram believed the Almighty is the all-supreme ruler. Abram believed the Almighty is the creator of all things. As the Almighty had imagined and devised, as the Almighty predicted, the Almighty counted Abram's belief as righteous. The Almighty counted Abram being righteous according to his law and truth. Therefore the Almighty justified Abram. The Almighty continued speaking to Abram, saying, I am the Almighty, the all-supreme ruler, the creator of all things. I brought you out of southern Babylonia, out of the city-state of Ur. Ur is a city of moon worship in Chaldee of the Chaldeans. I brought you away from that land of your kindred to give you this land to inherit. Abram asked the Almighty, "How long, and how will I know when I can confess that I have taken possession of the land as an inheritance?" Then the Almighty answered Abram and spoke unto him, saying, "To your altar bring me 1 heifer of 3 years old, 1 she-goat of 3 years old, 1 ram of 3 years old, 1 turtle dove, and 1 nestling bird with no feathers." Abram obeyed and got these animals for the Almighty. Then he cut them in the middle and laid each piece one against another on the altar. But Abram did not cut the birds. When the vultures came down upon the dead bodies of the animals, Abram drove them away. When the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. As Abram slept, a great darkness and misery fell upon him. Abram saw fear, terror, fright, dread, and the horror of terrible idols. After the sun went down and it was dark, Abram awoke. When Abram lifted his eyes, he saw the Almighty passing between those pieces of animal flesh he had cut up and offered on the altar. Passing between those pieces of animal flesh, the Almighty was like a torch of burning flames and smoke. Passing between those pieces of animal flesh, the Almighty was like an oven of smoke and fiery hot flames. Then the Almighty spoke unto Abram, saying, "Consider what has been revealed to you. Instruct others on these things, and make these things known. Of surety, of this age, you have seen your descendants to the end of their generations. You know that the descendants of your posterity will serve a stranger in a land that is not theirs. These strangers will oppress them, humiliate them, ravish them, defile them, afflict them, and deal cruelly with them for 400 years. At the end of that time, that nation whom they will serve, I, the Almighty, will judge and execute judgment upon. Afterward, your descendants will come out with great amounts of goods, riches, and possessions. Abram, you will be counted with the respect and honor of your forefathers, who had the peace and friendship of my covenant. You will be counted with the respect and honor of your forefathers, who had peace from war, who had peace in their relationships, who had health, who had prosperity, and who were completely safe. You will be buried in a good old age, but in the 4th generation your descendants will come here again, because the inequity of the Amoree is not yet full." The Almighty continued speaking, then made a covenant of peace and friendship with Abram. The Almighty spoke to him, saying, "I have given this land unto your children, unto their descendants, and unto the descendants of your posterity, from the river of Egypt unto the great river of Euphrates, including the Canaan, who are a Canaanite people, the Kenizzee, who are descendants of Kenaz, the Kadmoni, the Hittites, who are descendants of Heth. Heth is the 2nd son of Canaan, the Perizzee, who are Canaanites of the open country, the Rephaim, who are an old tribe of giants, the Emoree, even all the Canaanites, the Girgashi, and the Yevusi. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had no children. She had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. Hagar had the reputation, the honor, the authority, and glory of a slave girl. Sarai spoke to Abram, saying, "Now look, the Almighty has stopped me from giving birth to a child. I am under his restraint. I pray that you go in unto my maid with sexual affections." This is the end of part 10 of my video series titled The Book of Genesis Unsealed and Untold, that covers my manuscript titled The Almighty, the Beginning, His Creation of Mankind, His Promise to Judge Mankind, His War against the Elohim, His New World, and His Order. I am Shiloh, the last scribe for the house of Jacob. Watch my videos, follow me, and discover the recorded truth about the Almighty, His power, His glory, His honor, His reputation, His experiences with, and its message to all individual species of persons on the earth.